What does it take to change your beliefs? And is there a faster and better way to change your unconscious mind so that you can have a life that you truly want and get there much faster? Well, today we're going to be talking about the power of the unconscious mind and how to use some little hidden secrets to help you change your unconscious mind and live the life that you really want. Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, this show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business.
Do you have a product or service that you would like to sell online? Or maybe you've been thinking about it, but you're reserved to do it because you need a website, you need complicated systems, and you need to spend money? Well, I've created a completely free course that teaches you how to use Facebook in a purely organic way. This means no ads and no money are needed. You can use Facebook completely free. So head on over to thrivinglaunch.com. Opt into my Profit from Social Media course. I'm going to teach you the free methods to using Facebook to make money today.
You guys are in for a real treat. We are here with one of my greatest heroes, Dr. Bruce Lipton. Dr. Bruce Lipton started out as a biologist, and he was doing research telling people how cells function. And what he found in his research with a team of other specialists was something that changed how we perceive the world forever. That cells were not affected by the DNA as everybody thought. DNA was not the powerhouse of the cell, but it's actually the outside environment that affects cells. And the implications of this are enormous. So we're going to dive into how our belief, how our perception, how our environment affects everything. Welcome to the Thriving Launch podcast. This is the most exciting episode I could possibly think of. We are here with Bruce Lipton. Bruce, are you ready to launch?
I am so excited that I got pre-launch things going on here right now because we have such a wonderful opportunity to talk about a topic that can make all our lives so happy and beautiful and healthy, and I love that.
Well, that is just, you're after my own heart. This is amazing. Well, I know that you do such incredible work in biology and looking at how we can use the brain to its full capacity, but I know that your real passion is helping us live more fulfilling, richer, deeper lives. And I know you have this book out called The Honeymoon Effect and how that can help improve our lives. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I use the honeymoon effect as a term related to people who just fall in love. And I say to those people who have just fallen in love, head over heels, and they're in it, and I say, are you healthy? And the fact is, well, they're very healthy. As a matter of fact, that's how you can see, oh, look how they're in love. See how they glow. There's a healthy glow. So love provides a lot of health. Did you have a lot of energy when you fell in love? That's always a joke because people made love for days without stopping for sleep or food. And, the real important understanding is this. Was it like heaven on earth? Was life so beautiful at that time of falling in love that when you looked around, you go, oh my God, so exciting to be here. Everything is so wonderful. No matter how crappy it may have been up to the day before you met this person, all of a sudden you meet this person and your life takes on a completely different attitude. Now it's like happy and love and joy. Even things you didn't like before are acceptable and okay. Your whole life has changed. Now the question is, what happened that took a life from everyday life, blah, 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 not too great, and all of a sudden thrust you into, oh my God, it's heaven on earth. What's really important about this is that the heaven on earth part just seems to show up. And yet, here's a simple reality. We created that. We created a new life experience from whatever was happening before you fell in love. Up to that moment, you just fell in love, and all of a sudden, everything was different. What was it? I mean, it was a profound revolutionary change in your whole life, and the idea was this. We now know that this is the first time that individuals become what is called mindful. I said, what does mindful mean? I said, mindful means keeping your mind present at the present moment. Versus what? Well, the average person, and this is really important, uses what we call the subconscious mind, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, about 95% of the day to run their life, and only use the conscious mind approximately 5%. I say, what's different about these two minds? And here's where the whole thing comes down. We have once said the mind, and everyone thought the mind, a single thing called the mind. And I go, no. There are two minds that are interdependent. They work together, they have different functions, and they learn in different ways. And this becomes very important. So let's start off with the very foundation. It says this: my research in biology and cloning stem cells revealed how the mind controls the chemistry of the blood, and that the chemistry of the blood in turn controls the genetics and the behavior of the cells. As you change your mind about life, you change the chemistry of the blood, which then in turn leads to a change in your biology. This is a very important concept for number one. Most people believe their life is controlled by their genes. And when they believe that, that's an unfortunate situation, because that's basically saying I'm a powerless individual. And I say, why? Because, well, genes, presumably from most people, the public's point of view, control the characteristics of our physical body and are also controlling emotion and behavior. And I say, okay, these genes are controlling these characteristics. Did you pick the genes you came with? And most people, no, not as far as we know, we didn't pick the genes. And then I go, well, if you don't like the traits that you have now, can you go change the genes? And the answer is no, you can't really change the genes. And all of a sudden I say, oh my God, what does that mean? It says, well, your life is being controlled by genes which you neither picked nor can you change. And all of a sudden it says, then in some way my life is apparently predetermined by my genetics. This is the belief that the public has been programmed with. And this belief is disempowering because it makes you a victim of your heredity. Meaning, if you got cancer running in your family, you go, oh my God, I got those genes for cancer. Oh my God, I'm going to get cancer. You know, somebody like something as beautiful as Angelina Jolie finds that she has the breast cancer gene. And then the fear of that this gene is going to give her breast cancer, then has a double mastectomy as a preventative measure because she was so sure the genes were going to give her the cancer because, oh yeah, genes cause cancer and genes cause all the problems. And it's like, stop. New biology. Genes are blueprints. Why is that relevant? Well, genes provide instructions on how to make the building blocks of the body. The building blocks are called proteins. So there are about 100,000 different types of proteins. So imagine a Lego kit with 100,000 different parts that you can assemble in different ways. And I say, well, in a biological Lego kit, the proteins, 100,000 different ones, I can assemble some proteins to make a muscle cell, or I can assemble some different proteins to make a nerve cell, or, like a recipe, mix some different proteins, make a skin cell. I go, okay, so the building blocks are the proteins. The genes are blueprints to make the proteins because they're very complex molecules. And somewhere along the line, actually starting around 1953, when the DNA double helix was discovered, we bought into the belief that genes control the characteristics. Genes turn on and off, and that's what people have been living by since 1953, that genes make decisions. We didn't pick them, we can't change them, and their decisions control our lives. That makes us victims because we have no power.
And Bruce, I just want to comment real quick. So you must have learned how to change the genes, man, because you're one of the happiest people I've met.
Well, I sure found out that the program was not in my genes. And this was the most important part, because if we go about trying to say, well, I can fix my life if I change my genes, that's what everybody's trying to do. Oh, genetic engineering. Let me engineer a new gene for you and your life will change. And it goes like this. First thing is this. Genes control nothing. That's an absolute fact of science. Right now, I'm telling people genes do not turn on and genes do not turn off and genes do not control anything. Genes are blueprints. It's exactly what they are. And to give you an emphasis of that, let's say we go into an architect's office. She's working on a blueprint. You lean over her shoulder and you ask the architect, he says, excuse me, is your blueprint on or off? And she'll turn around and look at you like, what are you, crazy? It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. And I go, precisely. Genes are blueprints. There is no on and off. Despite all that you heard throughout school, that genes turn on and genes turn off and genes control something, that was a misperception. It's a belief that's not true. A gene is a blueprint. And then I go, well, then how are genes controlled? And I say, well, how are blueprints controlled? There's a contractor. And the contractor calls up the blueprints and then builds according to the blueprints. But guess what? The contractor can also change the blueprints too. I go, okay, in your body, the cells have genes. The genes are blueprints. I say, yeah, but which blueprint should be read? I mean, a different set of blueprints for a skin cell, for a bone cell, for a muscle cell, whatever. I go, the environment, which is the environment inside under your skin, inside your body, the environment, which is mainly the fluids derived from the blood, are what the cells live in. So cells are like fish. They live in an aquarium. When you cut yourself open, fluids leak out, and the fluids live in that. And when I grow cells in a tissue culture in a laboratory, I put them in a plastic dish, but I have to provide them with the environment that they live in, the equivalent of blood. So if I grow mouse cells, what I do is I go look at mouse blood, its chemical composition, and try to synthesize a version of it, which we call culture medium for mouse cells. If I grow human cells, then I look at human blood composition and synthesize a growth medium, a culture medium for growing human cells. So the cells are growing in a liquid environment similar to the environment they came from within the body. And what I found in my research was when I would clone a cell, that would mean just pick one cell and put it in a petri dish all by itself, that after about 10 hours, the cell would divide. And so first there's one cell, then after 10 hours, there are 2 cells, and after 20 hours, there are 4 cells, and after 30 hours, there are 8. And what happens is every 10 hours, my population is doubling. After a week, I got like 50,000 cells in the petri dish. And I go, okay, this is really cool. What's unique? And I go, what's unique is this. They're all genetically identical because they came from the same parent. It's like 50,000 twins in a sense. They're all genetically the same. So I have 50,000 genetically identical cells. Here's what I do, and this is the part that blew my mind, and that is I split the genetically identical cells into 3 petri dishes. And remember, I grow them in an environment called culture medium, which is the equivalent of blood that I synthesize. But since I synthesize it, I could change some of the composition. So I create 3 similar but different versions of culture medium, changing the chemical composition a little bit. So each of the 3 dishes has genetically identical cells, but a slightly different culture medium. Chemistry is a little different. In one dish, the cells form muscle. In a different environment, culture medium composition, the cells form bone. And yet in a third environment with a different composition, the same genetically identical cells form fat cells. So I said, wait, what's responsible for the expression or development of the cells? Why did some become muscle, some become bone, some become fat cells? And the answer is this. It wasn't the genes, because they all had the same genes. Mm-hmm. The only thing that was different was the chemical composition of the culture medium. So this, back in 1968, blew my mind because I'm teaching in the medical school classroom. Genes are turning on and off, and genes are controlling the characteristics. And then I go into my laboratory, and the cells are revealing, no, the genes had nothing to do with that. It was the environment that was changing it. If I change the environment, I change the fate of the cells. So I was really in a conundrum because I'm teaching one thing to students, and when I come in the lab, the cells are teaching me a completely different thing. Well, we now know that the cells were right, and I was incorrectly teaching students because genes don't turn on and off, and genes don't control anything. It's the environment. You change the chemistry of the environment. So I say, okay, but Bruce, you're talking about cells built into a plastic petri dish. I go, what about cells in the human body? And I go, here's the jokey part, Louis. And I want to tell you why it's the jokey part, because when you look in the mirror and yourself, there's Louis, one single human looking back, a single organism. I go, misperception. Because the fact is this, you're made out of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. So you, by actual real definition, you are a community of 50 trillion cells. When I say Bruce, I'm not a single thing. The living elements are cells, and Bruce is, by definition, a community of 50 trillion cells. So
Bruce Lipton is a community. He is a country.
A globe, 50 trillion. I mean, we have 8 billion. 50 trillion is a little bit larger than that. And the relevance is this. Here's the funny part. Ready? A human body is a skin-covered petri dish. with 50 trillion cells inside. And it's got culture medium. I say, yeah, the culture medium's the blood. So here's the point. Does it make a difference to the fate of the cell if it's in the skin-covered culture dish or the plastic culture dish? And I go, no, it really is based on the culture medium. In the plastic dish is the version I make, but in the skin version is the one you make called blood. So I say, then the fate of your cells is controlled by the chemical composition of your blood, not the genes. I go, oh, yeah, that's true. And I say, well, then what controls the chemistry of your blood? And I go, the brain is the chemist. It adds elements or takes away elements and coordinates the chemistry of the blood. So it's controlling the information that's going to the 50 trillion cells. And I go, yeah, now, and here it is, finally, you ready? Most important question. So what chemicals should the brain release into the blood, which in turn we know will control the genetics? I go, it's based on the mind. The mind interprets the world, and the brain converts that interpretation into chemistry, which then is sent through the blood to the body to coordinate 50 trillion cells so that their collective community supports your life in the world that you're experiencing. So as you experience the world and you perceive the world, your perceptions, by definition, are turned into chemistry, which in turn controls your biology. The simplest one, it's like this, is like, let's say you walk outside your house and it's cold out. I go, the environment temperature cold is picked up by the nervous system. The nervous system says, oh, if it's cold out, then I'm going to change the chemistry, and the brain is going to release chemistry to do what? Cause your body to increase the metabolism and heat up and keep your temperature at that 98.6 degrees for health, no matter what the temperature is outside. I say, well, what controlled that activity? It's not the genes. It was the outside temperature. Cold out, I raise my body temperature. In contrast, if I walk out the door and it's a sizzling hot summer day, I don't raise my body temperature. A hot temperature is perceived by the brain, and then the brain releases chemistry to cause us to perspire, which causes us to cool off. So I said, well, then the biology of warming and cooling had nothing to do with genes. I go, no, it had everything to do with the environment. And this is true for virtually every function in the human body. It has nothing to do with the genes. The genes are just the building blocks to make a cell fit the environment. But the environment is interpreted by the brain and specifically the mind. And therefore, the mind's interpretation of life, what's going on in your life, releases chemistry that matches what's going on in your life into the blood via the brain. And that chemistry goes to the 50 trillion cells in your skin-covered petri dish. And that chemistry controls the genetic activity. And this is a new science called epigenetics. Now,
so hold on one second, Bruce, because everybody here listening, I want to, how powerful what Bruce is sharing right now. He is essentially saying, debunking this whole study and this whole belief system that we have around, it could lead to our belief systems around cancer, AIDS, you name it, or even being cold, there's a degree of which your mind is creating an atmosphere for the rest of the cells and the rest of the community. And so that just kind of blows me away. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for these trillion beings then. This mind is capable of, like, let's say when we're feeling love, since that's when we started off this conversation about the honeymoon effect. And when we're in total love, now the brain is sending a very different message to the rest of the system. And oh my gosh, walking down that street, I never noticed the flowers and it's so sunny. It really brings me to Khalil Gibran in this poem where he talks about love with a variety of people, and everybody has a very different sharing of how they view things based on their experience with love. I want to let you continue, but that is so astounding what you're saying.
That's good. It's very important because this is the point. The point is this. Your perception of what's going on in the outside world is a perception of the mind. A mind is doing an interpretation. Two people can look at exactly the same scene, be in the exact same place, look at the same scene, and have totally two different interpretations of what's going on. No two people see the world in the same way. But I say, well, the outside is exactly the same. What's going on in each individual body is different because each body has a different perception of what they see. I go, yeah, but what does that mean? I say, well, perceptions are converted by the brain into chemistry, which in turn controls the genetics. So to go back about the love issue, for example, is this. Let's say you're sitting here right now and your eyes are closed, and then I say, open your eyes. And when you open your eyes, someone you love is standing in front of your face. So there's a perception in the mind. What is the mind perception? I love this person. I go, oh, that perception is now going to be converted into chemistry. And I say, well, what chemistry? I say, well, the number one chemical that comes out from love is called dopamine. Dopamine is pleasure. Yeah, when I'm in love, I feel in my body pleasure. Why? Because the mind interprets love as a perception, and then love is correlated with the release of dopamine, which is pleasure. And I say, and what else is released when you're in love? And I go, well, oxytocin, which is bonding, which is the one that's giving me pleasure. Oxytocin is a chemical in my body that will create a behavior that will have me attach to the one that's giving me the love. So that's called bonding. I said, what else? I say, when I'm in love, my brain in perceiving love will release vasopressin. Well, that's a chemical that makes us more attractive. And the reason is why? To keep your partner present. So I'm adjusting my biology. And then lastly, what else is coming out with the brain on love? And I'll tell you, growth hormone. That already implies what it is, growth hormone, a hormone released by the brain that causes growth, maintenance of the body, and health. And I go, precisely why when people fall in love, they're healthier. They have a glow of love. And I go, yeah, that's not a coincidence. That's a chemical consequence of a thought of love. So I say, okay, look, my whole biology is now moving toward love. I see all the things that enhance my love, everything connected with love. All the things that are not loving don't even come into my picture at all at this moment because my mind is filtering just the love thing. So all of a sudden I fall in love and it's heaven on earth at this moment, okay? Why? All the wonderful chemicals. And I say, well, wait a minute. Let's just say that person just has this great love thing and their eyes are closed right now and all of a sudden they open them up, but instead of the love they see in front of them, they see something in front of them that scares them. I go, well, wait a minute. If something scares me, I'm not going to release the chemistry associated with love. I'm going to release the chemistry associated with fear, which is what? Stress hormones and inflammatory agents. Mm-hmm. I go, why is that relevant? Because if I take the chemicals of a brain that is stimulated by stress and put those chemicals in a plastic petri dish with my cells, you know what? The cells stop growing and they begin to die. You know what? There's an old saying called fear kills. And I go, yep, there's a biology for that. The reason why is the chemicals released by the brain in fear shut down the growth of the body and shut down the immune system. And you go, why would it do that? And the answer is simple. Let's say you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And I say, you have, here's the amount of energy in your body, 100%. I say, how much of that 100% do you want to allocate to run away from that saber-toothed tiger? If you don't say 100%, there's a problem.
I'm committed to survival here, Bruce, 100%.
So 100%, I go, yeah, so what does that mean? Well, I say, well, the body was using energy for things like growth. And you say, well, I'm an adult. This is very important. I go, yeah, but guess what? Your body's made out of about 50 trillion cells. And every day, your body loses hundreds of billions with a B, hundreds of billions of cells, normal attrition, die. Red cells are dying by billions. But by the second, you're losing billions of cells. I say, important point. How can I stay alive if I don't replace the cells? I say, then it says you have stem cells, and they're the equivalent of embryonic cells. So every day while you're losing hundreds of billions of cells, your stem cells are dividing and creating hundreds of billions of replacements. Every day you're growing. So, but what happens is you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. You have energy to replace those hundreds of billion cells, and you have a lot of energy. But I say, how much do you want to run away from the tiger? And Lewis, you said, all of it. I go, yeah. So I say, what about growth? I say, stress hormones shut down the growth of the body to conserve energy to run away from the threat. So the moment you're in stress, you stop replacing the body cells. Well, that sounds like a very negative thing. If I need these body cells to live and I'm under stress, I go, but wait, go back to when the system was developed. 100,000 years ago, 200,000, a million years ago. I say, well, what stress did you have? I say, run away from the saber-toothed tiger. That's a big stress.
I want to get back to Kamala.
Yeah, that's,
Absolutely.
that's a huge thing, that what you're talking about is it really comes down to stress, and how when we're in a state of stress, we can't have that state of optimal health, optimal mental function, because all of our energy is going into protecting our bodies to be able to run away from that saber-toothed tiger.
See, but when the system was designed, that long time period ago, I said, well, what are the stresses you have? I said, well, okay, running away from the tiger. Says that happen every day, all day? And I go, no, that's an event when it happens. It's rare, but you run away from the tiger. And I say, well, okay, so you escape the tiger. Now what? And I said, well, no more stress. And then I go back into growth again. So stress originally was only used for short intervals, just a short interval. Run away from that tiger, get away. I'm free. I don't have to have stress anymore, and I'm back to growth. Today's world, it's quite obvious. It's 24/7, 365 stress every day. The world is creating a stressful environment for us. So you're going to keep your job. You're going to have enough money for the food and pay the rent. Are you going to have friends around? Or are you going to lose your friends or whatever? Every day you're in these stress issues. And it's like, guess what? Every day you're releasing stress hormones. Every day you're inhibiting the health of your cells that are being replaced. They're not being replaced very quickly. In fact, that's one of the causes of illness. And the second cause of illness is also from stress, and that is this: the immune system, which uses a lot of energy. And I say, well, you know that, because if you've ever been sick, you didn't have enough energy to get out of bed. That's how much the immune system is using. It uses a lot. So we go back to the situation. I say, okay, you happen to have a bacterial infection, a bad case of diarrhea happens to be brewing right now, but you're also being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. How much of your energy do you want to fight the diarrhea bacterial infection, and how much do you want to run away from the tiger? And I think Luis has already got the answer.
Bruce, I'm going to poop while I run.
So the issue is this: stress hormones conserve energy from the immune system by, guess what? Inhibiting the immune system function. When you're stressed, you don't want to use all that energy to be in bed and recover. You want to run away from that tiger. So I say, well, you got this bacterial infection. You got a tiger chasing you. Who cares about the infection? Simple reason, as Luis said, if the tiger catches you, the bacterial infection is not your problem anymore. And so the significance is stress has now done two things. One, it shuts down the growth of the body to conserve energy so that you could run away from that tiger. And two, it shuts down or inhibits the immune system, which is protecting you from threat, but internal threat. And the result is what? Stress, and this is a fact. This is it. You ready? 90% of illness on this planet is directly tied to stress. For what reason? Because you've interfered with keeping the body alive by replacing the cells, and you've shut down the immune system as protecting you from the infection, and sure as hell you're going to get sick when you're stressed. That's what the consequence of stress is: sickness. And the reason is why? You're not maintaining yourself. I mean, the immune system is shut down. You know, interesting point. There's a therapeutic use for stress hormones. When a doctor wants to transplant an organ into a person, let's say I want to transplant a kidney or a lung or a heart into a patient, remember, it's foreign tissue. If I transplant somebody else's kidney into your body, your immune system, by definition, should say, hey, not self, and eliminate the kidney, okay? So I say, well, how do doctors make sure that the transplanted kidney isn't rejected? And the answer is, they give the patient stress hormones before doing the operation, so that when the kidney is transplanted, the immune system is being inhibited and will not attack the kidney. So that's how powerful stress hormones are in shutting off your immune system. And I go, yeah, but 90% of the health issues on this problem are from the perception of stress. Whether it's real or not, that's not relevant. It's your perception of it. Your world could be totally safe, but if you have a fear, your cells can't see that the world is safe. All they're talking to is the nervous system. The nervous system says there's fear and we have a reason for it. Then the cells are going to gird themselves up and prepare for the stress. And yet in the real environment, there'd be no reason for having stress, but it's just your perception. So all of a sudden we start to realize that the cells are getting information from the nervous system, which is interpreting the environment and then sending chemistry to the body cells via the blood to adjust the body cells to what's going on in the world. I said, hot out, cool the body down, cold out, warm the body up. So I'm adjusting. And the point about that is, since the cells don't actually see the outside. They only can gauge their activity by what the nervous system sends. And this is where the biggest problems in life come from, because we generate beliefs and perceptions that may not be accurate and totally false. And yet, once we generate them, they control our chemistry. They control our immune system. They control our biology. And so a false assumption could kill you. And this is really critical because, again, the cells are supposed to be adjusting to the environment, but because they're contained inside the skin, they can only adjust to your perception of the environment, which is releasing chemistry, which is controlling their genetics. And so the issue that we come down to now is let's go to the first conclusion. A, you're not controlled by your genes. The genes are simply blueprints that are controlled by the environment, and in this case of humans, very much influenced by your perception of the environment, separating environment from perception, because our perceptions could be right, but our perceptions could be wrong. To the cells, they just see the perceptions, right or wrong. They're going to read whatever the perception is. So wrong perceptions will mislead your biology and take you away from health.
Yeah, and one of the things that you're really touching on for me really powerfully, and some of the audience, you guys know some of my story, that I was homeless as a child. I grew up in a third world country. My mother was murdered and I was adopted. And there was a whole belief system that I had formed around that. Well, first as a child, I didn't have a belief system. So I didn't really, I was just so young. I was 8 years old when I came to the US. And over time, because people kind of, I feel like to some degree, because people told me it was bad that what happened and stuff, I began to perceive it that way. And then when I went through a whole process of changing my perceptions about what happened, my relationship and my emotions around it shifted. And that's a huge overhaul to do that. And I feel like that's naturally where you're leading us then. It's like, okay, so if we can control these trillions of cells, and it's not like this kind of like stranglehold kind of control, because there's this kind of co-creation almost that you could say is happening, right? There's so many different things happening, but I am hearing from you, or my mind wants to go there, is like, okay, you've got me excited because I feel like I could somehow impact my community, right? My community being my body and everything. But how do I do that?
How you perceive the past, how you perceive the future, how you perceive the present.
Well, yeah, all of these things, because it's your perceptions. And then we agree with this part right now, I hope, is that some of your perceptions are accurate and some of your perceptions are not accurate. And why is that relevant? Because the cells cannot distinguish an accurate from an inaccurate perception. They just see the perception. And so your perception of life, whether it's right or wrong, is still the judge of what your genetics and your behavior is going to be. That's why the new science is called epigenetics versus genetics. The difference, when I say genetic control, old science, which almost everybody out there has learned, genetic control simply means control by genes. But I say the new science is called epigenetics. And when I say epigenetic control, what does that mean? I say, well, the first thing is this: epi means above. So when I say epigenetic control, I am literally saying control above the genes. The new science takes the control out of the genes and puts it where? Into the nervous system, because the action of the chemistry from the nervous system is above and controls the genes. So now I say, well, then the mind is the device that controls not just your genetics and your behavior on the inside, but it also controls your behavior and how you interact on the outside. So your mind is controlling genes and behavior through the chemistry released by the brain. This is now where the conflict comes from. Because if I ask people out there, I say, well, what do you want in your mind? Well, I want to be healthy. I want to have a great loving relationship, and a great job wouldn't be a bad thing either. I would love all these things. I say, well, then how come you don't have these things? And that's what you want. And all of a sudden there's I don't know, because these are my wishes and desires, but I'm having trouble manifesting them. So maybe the universe is not supporting me. Okay, here we go. The personal responsibility thing is coming to us now, and it comes this way. When I say the mind, there's actually two minds. There's two different minds, meaning the two minds have different functions and they learn in different ways. And this is where the problems in our life come from. Number one, let's name the two minds: the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is the latest addition of the brain. It constitutes about 10% of the brain. 90% of the brain is dealing with what is called the subconscious. Okay, so I have two minds. Their functions are different, and here's what's profound. They work together. This is a part where they come together, they integrate, but let's first understand the function of each mind. Conscious mind, the newest part, is the mind associated with imagination. It's the creative mind. It's the mind connected to your personal identity and your spirit. And that's located in the front part of your brain, right behind your forehead, called the prefrontal cortex. So your spirit location, who you are as a unique individual, is pretty much associated with that frontal piece of prefrontal cortex. And I go, okay, so the conscious mind, the newest evolution, 10% of the brain, it's related to creativity and imagination. And this is where humans excel above lower organisms, because most lower organisms, their lives are stimulus response, and yet we have a conscious mind. What's important? Somewhere between the stimulus and creating the response. The conscious mind can create whatever kind of response it wants. It doesn't always have to be the same response. It's creative. So the conscious mind is this great opportunity to expand on our behavior and all these things. And this is what makes humans so powerful in the world, because our imagination and our ability to put things together, we can create things like computers and rocket ships, and frogs don't do that. So I say, okay, conscious mind, really cool, creative, wishes, desires, because that's the creative part. I say, Louise, tell me what you want from your life. And whatever answer you give me, by definition, is going to come from the conscious mind, because that's a creative mind. It's thinking about something that hasn't happened yet. It's creating a future. The subconscious mind does not live in the past or the future. The subconscious mind, 90% of the brain, is always in the present moment. Relevance. If I could talk to your subconscious mind, I say, when did I learn how to walk? And no matter how old you are, the conscious mind would say, today. Why? It doesn't see time. Everything is always at the same present moment. So whatever you learned as an infant today, that's when I learned it today.
I'm starting to like this guy, this mind.
Well, wait a minute, because here's where the problem comes from. So the subconscious mind, another way of looking at it is called the habit mind. What does it mean? Conscious mind, creative. I can imagine things that don't exist, and I can create things from that. The subconscious mind's habit mind. It learns a program, and once the program is in there, you push the button and it plays the program. The same forever and ever and ever until you rewrite the program. I learned how to walk when I was an infant. Do I have to learn how to walk again? No. It's a program. It's so built into the system. I don't even have to say to myself, okay, start walking. All I have to do is an intention to go over there, and my program of walking will engage itself. It's automatic at that point. It's a habit. So there's two minds, conscious, creative, imagination, subconscious, habit. Now, here's the issue. When you're thinking, that's conscious mind, creative. I'm thinking. Okay? So, Kamala, let me ask you, what are you doing on Monday at 2 p.m.? You got something going?
I have to check my schedule.
Okay, yeah. And where is that schedule right now? Is it in your head?
You better not be trying to ask her on a date.
The whole point about that question is this. Where's the answer coming from? The answer is not coming from outside. It's coming from inside. You have to think about it. Okay? I say, well, wait a minute. If your conscious mind is driving the vehicle, let's say you're controlling your nervous system, controlling your behavior. You got the hands on the wheel. You're driving the car with your wishes and desires. I want to go here. I'm going to go do that. And I say, great, wishes and desires. I say, let's say you're walking down the street, and then all of a sudden you have a thought. The conscious mind at this moment, is it paying attention to the walking on the street, or does it go inside your head and look for the answer? That's a question.
It goes inside your head and looks for the answer.
But then what does it mean? This is so beautiful. Why? Because the moment the conscious mind went ahead, it's not paying attention to what's going on the outside, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the next piece. I'm going to add this. But I'm walking down the street, so if I have a thought, does that mean I freeze in my track until the thought's finished and then start walking again? I go, no. When my conscious mind is in thought, my subconscious by default becomes autopilot. In other words, if I'm walking down the street and I have a thought, I continue walking down the street, and my walking is managed by my subconscious. I'm not going to walk into the building or hit a pole. I'm going to walk perfectly well toward my destination. Why? It's an automatic program. Walk to here, period. I go, so what's the relevance? When I am thinking and my conscious mind is engaged in creative imagination, by definition, it's not paying attention. And whatever behavior I'm engaged with at that moment is now going to be run by what? Subconscious program, autopilot. Okay? So, okay, first thing is this. When you're thinking, autopilot, subconscious is in control. Number 2 point. How much of the time are we thinking? About 95% or more.
I'm trying to get to that clear, clean slate that Eckhart Tolle's been talking about. But
Well, you did. And we'll get back to when you did because it changed your world when you got to that clean one. But the point was this. The average person, 95% of the day has a thought going on, which means 95% of the behavior during that day is programmed and managed by the subconscious. What's the point? Well, you are the conscious mind. So I say, if your conscious mind's inside your head looking for what's happening at 2 o'clock on Monday, then the subconscious is running a show, but the conscious mind's not watching what the show is doing. In other words, when you default to the subconscious, the reason you're doing that is the conscious is not paying attention. So whatever behavior is being played by the subconscious at that moment, you're the one that can't see it. Why? Because your head is in thought. Okay, that's number 2. So now we have 2 minds, conscious, subconscious, conscious creative, subconscious habitual. 2, the conscious mind, conscious being pilot, subconscious autopilot, interchange with each other based on how much of the time you're thinking. When you're thinking, you default automatically to subconscious programming. 3, when I'm playing the subconscious program, what programs are they? And I go, here we go, Luis, we got it now. Here's the reason. I'll give an analogy so that people can connect with me on this. I say, look, we go to the Apple store. I want to buy a new iPod. So I get the brand new iPod. I'm so excited. I take it out of the box. In the front of the iPod, like an iPhone, it's a touch screen where I can do what? I can make a playlist. I can adjust the volume. I can go fast forward or change, the EQ. I can do I control the system creatively with the touch screen. Okay? The touch screen is equivalent to the conscious mind. It's creative. Make a playlist, adjust it, whatever you want. I go, okay, here we are back at the store. I buy the brand new iPod. I can't wait. I rip open the box. I take out the iPod and I push on the touchscreen play and nothing happens. And I'm like, I just bought this brand new. Is that nothing happened? I don't know. And the little 5-year-old kid standing next to me looks up to me and said, Mister, you can't play anything until you download some music first. And all of a sudden I go, in other words, you can't be creative if you don't already have programs to be creative with. Now, translation. The first 7 years of a child's life, the brain is not operating from consciousness. The brain is operating from subconscious. I go, yeah, but where'd the programs come from? Because when the moment you're born, if a child could speak, so set up a scenario, a woman is just giving birth, the baby is crowning, the head is coming out, the baby looks around at us, and imagine it could speak. Just imagine, I say, baby's just coming into the world, and I say, hey, welcome, tell us something. And the baby will look at you confused a bit and going, I don't know anything, I just got here. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, the subconscious and conscious of a brain of an infant just being born essentially doesn't have any programs in it. Actually, they started in the last trimester, so there are some. And the point about it is what? It's the iPod story. I can't use the conscious mind if I don't have programs to be conscious of. So nature, and this is the interesting part, creates the first 7 years of your life where consciousness is not a predominant activity of your nervous system. You're operating at a lower vibration than consciousness. In EEG, electroencephalograph terms, you're operating at a frequency called theta, which is below consciousness, but it's also called hypnosis. Point. A child being born is like a brand new iPod coming out of the factory. Before the consciousness can have a creative playlist, you got to download programs. So the system is designed 7 years, no consciousness as predominant behavior, just download. I say, well, download what? You observe your mother's behavior, you observe your father's behavior, you observe your siblings' behavior, you observe the community around you. Your brain operating in theta is like a video recorder. You're downloading other people's behaviors by observing them. And I go, then the fundamental programs, critical. The fundamental programs in the subconscious came from observing other people's behavior.
For that first 7 years of life.
First 7 years of life. And then I say, then what? And I go, well, then after that, 95% of your life is going to come from those programs. Why? Because 95% of your life, you're going to be thinking and defaulting to the subconscious, and the programs you play in the subconscious, the predominant ones are the ones you got in the first 7 years. So 95% of your life is not coming from your conscious mind, wishes, desires, aspirations. 95% of your life by default is coming from the subconscious. And I go, yeah, but the programs in the subconscious were installed in the first 7 years, and therefore 95% of your life coming from them, then your subconscious is going to control your fate. And you say, wow, that's an interesting scientific fact. And here's an more interesting fact. This idea is not new at all. This awareness has been known 400 years. The Jesuits have had a saying for 400 years. Give me a child until it's 7, and I will show you the man. What did they mean by that? Stop. And I mean, they're so proud. They boast that. And I go, people, do you understand what they're telling you? If you give them the first 7 years, they'll control your life by the program they put in there. I go, exactly what they were telling you. And they knew that. And that fact about controlling your life with the first 7 years of programming did not get lost in 400 years. It's just been passed on to other authorities who are influencing our lives by programming us in those first 7 years. And as the Jesuits said, controlling our lives.
You know, Bruce, I went to a Jesuit university, and I just feel like you just validated how smart I am.
I really want to jump in for a moment, because this is where we could look at, like, take Luis, for example, the first 8 years of his life. Well, most people in America can't fathom what he went through, the kind of suffering he experienced. And so an experience like that, what our work is now is to become more conscious, to be more mindful and more aware, so we're not operating from those old programs. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what you're getting to?
Yeah, exactly this. And I want to help people on this for a moment, because what if we conclude at this moment? Your life is not controlled by the conscious mind, which is wishes and desires. Okay? It's controlled by the subconscious, which has been programmed by observing other people. And then your life becomes an expression of their behavior. So much so, here's an interesting little side fact. Children adopted at a very young age into families where there's cancer running in that family, it turns out an adopted child put into that family will end up with the same family cancer with the same probability as any of the natural genetic siblings of that family, except for this fact: the adopted child came from totally different genetics. What was the point? Cancer runs in family not because of genes. Cancer runs in family because of programs that take us out of harmony. Disharmony is where the cause of disease comes from. So if we have programs that are not supporting our harmony, then we will manifest illnesses related to those programs specifically. Now, the issue about it is very clear to us. That my life, as suggested by the Jesuits, is really coming from my programs and not from my wishes and desires. And I go, yeah, well, that's the problem. That's why you wake up with great wishes and desires of love, health, happiness, all that stuff, and then end up at the end of the day, it's like it didn't happen. And then we think we're victims at this point. So let's put this all back into perspective at this point. Here's how it goes. First 7 years, you have to download programs just to get started, but you download them from other people. So the subconscious primary programs of others. And if they're not very good programs, it doesn't make a difference. You downloaded them anyway, you got them. Now, the point about it is this. 95% of the day, because your mind is in thought, those are the programs you're going to be manifesting. And I say, well, why is this relevant? And here it is, folks, just to help you out. The programming of your subconscious started in the last trimester of pregnancy and was intense from year 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and by 7 starts, the programming is less. So the first 7 years are programming, okay? And you say, but how do I know what the programs are? And they say, well, I could go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and then review my life experiences. And I say, wow, what a waste of time. And also, it doesn't help in a lot of cases. And I'll tell you why. Number one is you can't consciously identify the programs for a simple reason. Kamala, what did you learn when you were 1 year old? Tell me what message you got.
I don't remember.
No, you weren't there. You weren't there. Your conscious mind wasn't there. Okay. So all of a sudden it says, oh, Jesus, I don't know. I mean, I got my fundamental programs, especially before 3, and I can't really go back and tell you what my programs are. I said, well, go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And I said, yeah, but you're still trying to do what? Take your conscious mind and try to look into your subconscious and tell you what the programs are. I said, you can't do that. A simple reason is this. Imagine your subconscious mind as the Library of Congress, and your conscious mind is you. And I say, okay, walk in the Library of Congress and tell me everything that's in there. It's like, okay, there's too much information, and I can't do it all. I go, that's true. So your conscious mind doesn't really have a database about the programming. So now we're in a stuck situation. Jesus, these programs are controlling my life, and I don't remember what the programs are because I wasn't there. And I go, okay, for fun and ease, here it is. 95% of your life comes from the subconscious. Point? Your life is a printout of your subconscious programming. So you don't need to go back in your life to find out who did what to create the life that you have. All you have to do is look at the life you have because it is an expression of your programs. The things that you like that come into your life easily are there because you have programs to encourage and support that. In contrast, and this is the one I want you to listen to.
I knew eventually we would come out of this inception thing that you were doing. It was like, you're this whole community of 1 trillion cells, then there's you, and then you've got to go into the library and check yourself out, but you're not there. And I'm like, oh gosh, Bruce, I'm lost.
Well,
You've worked my mind into this inception.
Lewis, you've already done it. You looked at your life and you say, the things that work are good. I have programs to support them. Here's the clue. Anything you work hard at, anything you put a lot of effort into, anything you sweat over to make it happen, the question is, why are you working so hard? The answer is your programs and your subconscious don't support that. All of a sudden, life is easy. I'm looking for a relationship. I'm not having any luck with relationships. Well, the issue then is you don't have to go back and find out who caused your problem. Your problem is an issue with relationships. Now you can start to reprogram your mind on the basis of relationship versus it's a health issue. Oh, that's a different thing. Relationship changing will not affect that maybe. They're all interconnected. But the point about it is this. Let's save time and recognize that your life is a printout so that you can see your subconscious programs because 95% of your life is coming from those subconscious programs. And then I go, but you really don't see those programs when they're engaged. And then I give this story in my lectures and people laugh, which encouraged me to tell the same story because so many people experience. And it goes like this. I'm pretty sure you probably had a friend you grew up with or were close to, and you knew your friend's behavior very well. And you happen to know your friend's parent. And one day, you see that your friend has the exact same behavior as their parent. For you, this is a very exciting moment. You can't wait. You go, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. And then you back away from Bill. Bill goes totally ballistic. How the hell can you compare me to my dad? And everyone laughs because they've had some personal experience like that. And I go, this is the most profound story that we have been talking about today, Luis. This is the most profound story. What is it? Everybody else can see that Bill behaves like his dad. The only one who can't see it is Bill. Explain it. And here's the explanation. Bill acquired his behavior in a download period by observing his father, so the fundamental programs in his subconscious related to that particular behavior are his father's. When does he play it? Well, when his conscious mind's busy, when he's thinking, he'll play by default the father's one. I go, yeah, but then why doesn't he see it? And the answer is, because he's playing it because his conscious mind is busy. It's not observing it. And so the issue is this. Then 95% or so of our behavior is rarely even observed by us, but observed by others and engaged with by others. And if we have a negative behavior going out and we don't see it, then a person who's responding to our behavior is going to respond with a negative behavior as well. And then we're going to figure out, why do people do that to me? And the fact, well, you didn't see that your behavior was offsetting or wasn't really helpful or supportive or in any way encouraging. But you didn't see it. Why? Because you played that behavior by default when your mind was busy. So then we're not living the lives that we want. We're living the lives of the program. Oh, back to the Jesuits again. Then we go back to the opening line, if you can remember when we started this a long time ago, was about being in love. It was about being in love. I say, what's unique about love? And here's what science has found. It is the one time in your life where you don't process so much thinking. You stay present. You keep your conscious mind in the front, in control. You stop thinking. I say, why would being in love stop you from thinking? The answer is, well, everything you wanted that you were looking for, your dream, is now in front of your face. Why would you not pay attention to that and go into thought? Because everything you wanted is there. You stay conscious. You stay mindful. I say, oh, what does that mean? The one time in your life that you're not playing the programs 95% of the time. You're actually running your life 90% of the time with your conscious wishes and desires, not default subconscious. I say, then what is the consequence of running your life with your conscious mind versus your subconscious? And the answer is, how do you think you created the honeymoon? The honeymoon was an expression of what? Wishes and desires. You created your life with your conscious mind. You got out of the program and you manifested heaven on earth. It's the damn program that keeps us from experiencing that every day, all the time with everyone. And in fact, so conclusion, what we're talking about is the movie The Matrix. I
knew you were going to come to The Matrix. I was thinking that, and then I was like, don't say it, don't say it. Bruce might not want me mentioning more movies. So we're out of Inception and into The Matrix now.
Well, that's it, because what is The Matrix? So you say, well, it's a science fiction movie. And I go, no, The Matrix is a documentary. We have all been programmed. That is a fact of life. Everybody through age 7 has been programmed. Fact of life. And then in the movie, they say, well, you could take the red pill or the blue pill. So what's the difference? Oh, well, if you take the blue pill, when you wake up, you're back into the program and life is just the way it's always been. Everyday life, just the way it is. And they say, what if you take the red pill? You get out of the program. But they never really say what was the consequence. I will now tell you the consequence because you've already experienced it. What happened when you fell in love and for that moment stopped playing the program? And the answer was, no matter how crappy your life was up to that moment, from that moment on for the next period of time, the honeymoon, you have a whole new life. It's wonderful, healthy, happy, joyous, fun-filled, love, exciting, all that. Honeymoon, man, that's really great. And then you go, but it doesn't last. I go, here's why. Because this is a period of time where you stay mindful because you're in love. The honeymoon means now every decision I make is based on wishes, desires, and aspirations. So I'm making all the decisions to create beauty, happy, and love in my life, and I'm doing it, okay?
It makes me feel so good to hear you talk about that state of mind.
It is beautiful. There's a way of life that's so beautiful, except at some point, you really have to start thinking again. You got to. Why? Well, you still got a job. You got chores. You got the rent to pay. You got to fix the car. You got to do these things that are just normal life. And I go, well, what's the consequence? I said, the moment I start thinking about the chores, the job, whatever I have to do, what happens? Stop. Think about it. All of a sudden, I've been mindful. It's called honeymoon. I've been running on conscious creativity, wishes and desires, manifesting heaven on earth. Life all of a sudden gets busy. And I start thinking about the job. What behavior is now going to come out of my mouth? Is it my wishes and desires or my program?
Programs.
Program. And all of a sudden I say, why is that a problem? Because the program has the disempowering, self-sabotaging, limiting beliefs that influence and misdirect our lives. I go, well, what's significance? I say, well, look, you've been in a relationship with your partner. All of the behavior you have played in this beginning part is essentially behavior that you would like to be, wishes and desires. Here's who I am. I'm the most lovable, wonderful partner you could ever imagine, and I'm going to demonstrate it, and you're going to love me. And that's really great. And then you have all this love. And so your partner is saying what? Wishes and desires manifest from you. But I say all of a sudden you start to get busy, and your partner comes up and asks you a simple, loving question, and you turn around and go, blah, blah, blah. And your partner looks at you in total shock, thinking, who are you? Where did that come from? Now this is where the honeymoon come to the end. Why? And the answer is this. My partner, up until this moment, has never seen the negative bad side. But now she comes up, asks me a question, and my conscious mind is engaged in thought. So I'm not operating from wishes and desires. I'm defaulting to the program. I now play, let's say, my father's behavior, which was probably not amenable to a great relationship, okay? And she sees, not me, the behavior that is now coming out because my conscious mind is preoccupied in thought. I'm playing my father. And that was never part of the honeymoon. And she looks at me thinking, whoa, that's really crappy behavior. Now she has a choice. She's just seeing me do this behavior. She looks at me and goes, what kind of behavior is that? Uh-oh, where am I? Now let's put the position. Now we were in her hearing that. Now let's put it in a position of me saying that. What did I just say? Well, I don't know what I just said. You know why? My conscious mind was thinking about the job. So what came out was automatic, came from the subconscious. I go, yeah, it did come out automatically from the subconscious, but guess what? It was your father's program that you had downloaded. So you just interacted with your loving partner the way your father behaves, which is not supportive of you. And yet you didn't see it. Why? You were thinking. So now you're standing there, your partner comes up and goes, what kind of behavior is that? And you're thinking, I don't know what the hell she's talking about. Why? I'm the same person, but I don't understand. What's the problem here? And the reason was my response did not come into my conscious mind. It was played by my subconscious. And therefore, I didn't see it. And I'm sabotaging the relationship without even knowing I did it and getting flack from my partner for something I didn't even think I did. This is not making honeymoon right here. This is garbage now. And every time a new behavior shows up from that repertoire of bad behaviors, which psychologists tell us 70% or more of those subconscious programs are limiting and disempowering, every time a new one of those bad behaviors shows up, I'm breaking the honeymoon link piece by piece. Compromises on my partner's part that says, wow, I guess sometimes he acts like a jerk, but hey, the rest of the time he's pretty cool. And then more acting like a jerk, and then more acting like a jerk as new behaviors that were hidden in the subconscious start manifesting. My partner has to reconsider the relationship. At some point, maybe too many compromises. All of a sudden, all these negative behaviors showing up, all of a sudden, completely washed out the relationship. And a couple that was formerly so super in love separates, with each thinking, what the hell happened here? Not recognizing that they themselves were participating when they were playing the negative programs from their subconscious and not seeing or hearing themselves doing it. I mean, stop that. It's not always invisible. Sometimes you do see yourself playing one of these programs, and it's an embarrassing moment. It's like, oh my God, I was just acting like my mother. Oh God, oh, I just did my father. Oh God. And yet the reality is, yeah, you might catch it every now and then, but it's actually 95% of your behavior. So the issue is our lives are not being run by our conscious creative minds, because by default, our lives are run by subconscious programming, which by definition primarily came from other people and expressing their behaviors, which are usually misbehaviors, and we download them and become them. And then we walk forward thinking, how did all this stuff happen in my life when I had such positive thoughts about health, happiness, and love and all that? And it's like, how did I end up with this? Why? Because you're the one that didn't even see it happening. And then it happened. And then all you see is the consequences. You didn't see your own participation. We are personally responsible. And so this becomes very important for the reason is this. What if, and this is not a what, it's a can do. What happens if I change or rewrite my subconscious? Well, the first and most important thing is, of course you can do it. And I said, what is the consequence? And I said, think about it this way. What if you took all the negative behaviors that are interfering with your life and rewrote them with very positive behaviors, with wishes and desires that are the same as the conscious mind, so that either the conscious mind or the subconscious mind are both operating from wishes and desires? What's the relevance? Well, whether you're paying attention or not paying attention, you're still playing wishes and desires. And so, in other words, you can have a honeymoon life the rest of your life every day. The only reason you lost the honeymoon is because you went back and got caught up in playing the old tapes and sacrificing and sabotaging yourself without even you seeing it, and the honeymoon ends. If you had rewritten the subconscious program so that they conform and aligned with your wishes and desires, then it wouldn't make any difference if you're thinking or not thinking. Your behavior in both situations would always lead you to the full happiness of the honeymoon experience as a way of life every day of your life. And this is important because most people have touched the honeymoon experience. This is why I directed that book toward that, because if you've touched it once, you can refer back and go, yeah, kind of interesting little period. I go, well, it wasn't a coincidence. It was an actual fundamental reality that created that, okay? So we look at our lives. We have wishes and desires, conscious mind. We have subconscious program, as psychologists tell us, running 95% of the time, downloaded from other people, and sabotaging our lives. I say now we can identify the programs by just looking at your life and saying, where's the part that you want to happen that's not working? And then test your subconscious for whether it supports those beliefs or doesn't support those beliefs. And if it doesn't support what you want, then you can rewrite it. Now, this is the bigger monkey wrench in the system. And that is, we had started off with the fundamental belief that the conscious and subconscious were just the unity of a single mind. So if the conscious mind became aware of something, then the subconscious mind should, of course, follow along with it as well, because they're both together. I go, mistake.
If only.
It's two separate minds, but they learn in different ways. Here's the critical part. Conscious mind, being creative, can learn in a creative fashion. Conscious mind can read a self-help book, and after one reading go, oh yeah, I've been educated. I know how I should do it this way, and my life could be really good if I understood this. And then you say, well, I just read the book and I understand how it all works, and yet my life is still exactly the same. I go, oh.
Or they can listen to the Thriving Launch podcast with Bruce Lipton.
Well, that's what we're looking forward to here, the change part, because you can go to the lecture, you can read the book, you can watch the video, you can even just go, aha. And the conscious mind, being creative, can learn just from simply that. Read the book, it learned. I go, what about subconscious? I go, here's your problem. It's a habit mind. I said, well, how do you create a habit? I go, reading the book once is not a habit. So what's the point? The self-help book you read was picked up information-wise, educated, and enhanced your conscious awareness, and yet didn't touch any of your subconscious programs. You have the same behavior you had before you read the book, after you read the book, okay? Why? Conscious mind learns by reading the book. Subconscious habit, you don't learn from that one reading of the book, okay? So the conscious mind, subconscious mind learn in different ways. How can I teach the subconscious mind? Well, number one, let's go back to this one, because this is a fun one again. So many of us talk to ourselves. You know, I love donuts. Margaret, my partner, calls them circles of death. But, I love those guys. And of course, my health wasn't that great at this time. And so my programming is don't eat donuts. Don't eat donuts. And I keep talking to myself, don't eat the donut. Don't eat the donut. And then sure enough, 5 minutes later, there's a donut in my hand. And it's about halfway finished when my mind catches on, oh, my God, you're eating the donut. Well, now being so upset, well, you might as well finish it now that you started it. And then I eat the donut, okay? And I go, wow, I kept talking to myself not to eat the donut. Why did I eat the donut? And here's the fun answer. The conscious mind, yes, you're in it. Remember, I said that's a seat of your identity, your spirit, your consciousness. That's where you are. I say, oh, then who's in the subconscious mind? I go, nobody. There's nobody in there. It's a machine like a CD recorder. I go, why is that relevant? Well, let's say I record a program on a CD, put it in the machine, push play, and it plays the program. And I say, I don't like that program. So I say, okay, CD player, change the program, make something more fun and something I would like better than this program. And of course, the program continues to play just as it was. And then you get a little more upset. Come on, please change that program. I asked you to change the program. Don't eat the donuts. Don't you remember I said that? Still eating a donut. I get very frustrated and very upset with myself. And then I really almost give up, because how many times do I have to tell myself not to eat the donut, still end up eating donut, to realize it's not making any difference at all. The point about it is this. When your conscious mind was telling your subconscious not to eat the donut, who were you expecting to hear that message? And then you realize there's nobody in the subconscious, a machine. So I say, yeah, go talk to the CD player. It's playing a track on an album. I say, okay, tell it to play something different. Just talk to it. And the answer is, it's not going to change. It'll never change. I go, yeah, there's your problem. Trying to talk yourself into change is not going to work, because the subconscious mind has nobody to listen to your story. So I said, well, how does it change? I said, well, how does it learn? And here's the 3 things to rewrite your subconscious. Number 1, how did it learn in the first 7 years, the programmable period? I say, the brain was in a low vibrational frequency called theta, which is hypnosis. So I say, so if I use hypnosis, I can download a program. I can say, yes, you can. That's how you can do it. And I go, do I have to have somebody else do the hypnosis on me? I go, here's the fun part. The vibration of theta is a low vibration. It's below consciousness, which is alpha. And a higher vibration in alpha is beta, which is like schoolroom studying, work mind, work consciousness. And so there's higher vibration is beta. The next one down is more calm, is alpha. When you go down below alpha, theta, which is the hypnosis or imagination phase as well, because children in that theta period, first 7 years, mix the real world and the imaginary world seamlessly, and that's because theta is imagination and reality mixed. And then below theta is a one lower vibration called delta, which is absolute sleep. I say, well, what's significant? I say, well, every day when you wake up, you're coming from delta, the lowest vibration, just as you're waking up in the morning, just as you're coming out of sleep, the immediate like groggy period in that beginning, that's theta. That's where imagination and hypnosis and reality start to mix together. That's why if you have like a clock radio and the radio comes on as you're coming out of your sleep, the story in the radio can be mixed with the dream. And as you're waking up, the imagination took the radio thing and made part of your dream out of it. Theta, okay? But once you're awake, you're in calm consciousness called alpha. And once you go to work, you're in a higher vibration called beta. And I say, and then what happens as you come home? Oh, well, you came home, you were in beta, but once you started to relax, you calmed down, you went into alpha. And just as you're going to bed, alpha transitions into theta. And then later, when you're in deep sleep, you're in delta. So guess what? Every day when you're going to bed or when you're waking up, you go through a zone of theta. Naturally, from sleep vibration delta, the lowest, to waking up, you have to go through theta. Theta is imagination. So guess what? If you put earphones on and play a program as you're going to bed, just as your conscious mind lets go and is not paying attention to the program at this point, you're really going off into sleep. Theta is engaged. And what's theta doing? Taking the program and downloading it into the subconscious mind, because that's what theta does, hypnosis, bypassing the conscious mind, which just went to sleep. So every night, putting on earphones and playing a program of a behavior that you want to create in your life, repetition of that every night will then manifest that experience. So the first 7 years, hypnosis, theta, auto hypnosis with earphones, I said, and going to bed. That's the way you can program it. Number 2, what about programming after age 7? I go, oh, well, then the conscious mind's working. So how do I put a new program in? I say, you practiced. You repeated something over and over and over again, making a habit out of it. I say, you want to learn ABC. How many times did you start with ABC and then get to a certain point and then stop because you didn't know what was next? And then you thought about what was next. A, B, C, D, let's see. Oh, E. A, B, C, D, E. Oh, next one is, F. And you keep adding, and what are you doing? Repeating, adding and repeating. Finally, you get A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, you get to the end. Guess what? You got to the end, you don't have to do it anymore. Why? You've repeated it, made a habit out of it. Now it's enclosed in the habit mind. You can just call it up. It's already a habit. So repetition. As I say, you find that your behaviors are not supporting you, then guess what? Generate a behavior that represents supporting you and repeat it just like a player on a sporting team. Go out and do the practice. Just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Even if it's not real at the time, it will become real as it becomes downloaded as a program. Your subconscious will take that program and then use it to manifest life from it. So you start out, you might be sick with cancer, and your program is, I am healthy, I control my health. A couple of those programs like that, very positive thingy like that. And I say, well, what happens? Well, it's very hard for your conscious mind to say, I am healthy, knowing you're having a cancer right now. And I say, no, that's not the issue. You're repeating it over and over again for what? The subconscious. The repetition, habituation occurs. The subconscious now gets a program. What's the program? I am healthy. The function of the mind is to create coherence between your programs and your reality. So if I put in a program that I am healthy, and at that moment I have sick with cancer, what do you think the function of my mind is? Is to create an environmental situation where health can be restored. Why? Because my program says I'm healthy, my biology says I'm not. The function of the mind is to adjust the biology so it manifests the expression of the program. I can heal myself, but not with my conscious mind. That's good positive thinking. I go, yeah, positive thinking, I can heal myself, I say, and how much of the day are you using that positive thinking? Less than 5%? Oh, it's not going to have much of an effect. You want to have an effect? Put in a subconscious, make a program, it'll operate 95% of the day. So the two fundamental ways right now of learning are the two fundamental ways that we acquire the subconscious programs. A, hypnosis, first 7 years. B, repetition of a practice or a pattern, which occurs after age 7. How did you drive a car? You didn't know how to drive it when you first got in. You practiced and you experienced all of the aspects of driving. So now you get in the car, you've been driving for a while. You don't even think of the mechanics of the driving part. You put the key in the ignition, you're already thinking about where you're going and the destination. All of this now is automatic subconscious programming. And you can turn any aspect of life into that automatic subconscious program. Being in love can be a subconscious program. I say, why is that relevant? Well, whether you just stop and consciously say, God, I'm so happy I'm in love, or just walking down the street, I'm in love. Why? Because that's what my subconscious mind says. And I live that. So those are the two fundamental ways. Now, let me just add the last one, and this is really important because you can find it on my website, which is simple, brucelipton.com. Under resources, there's a whole listing of belief change modifications. And these belief change modalities all involve something called super learning. And what's relevant about them is these are practices where you can rewrite a subconscious belief in about somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. A belief you may have had 40 years affect your life. Using some of these technologies, you can rewrite that belief, make a positive belief out of it in anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes. And this is really necessary and cool because human behavior is causing the grossest experience on this planet. We're going extinct. Human behavior is undermining the web of life. Science has already acknowledged we're now into what is called the sixth mass extinction of life, but it's driven by human behavior. The only way out is to change human behavior. Therefore, there's an old saying that fits this. It is necessity is the mother of invention. We have a necessity to learn fast. And guess what? These new energy modalities called energy psychology, as a group name, and there are a whole variety of different ones. As I said, I have them listed on my website, are opportunities to rewrite your subconscious beliefs. And I say, well, you know what you want to rewrite? And the answer is simple. Yeah, look at your life. What's not working? Turn that into a statement that you want it to be as a positive present tense statement, whatever is not working. I have cancer, then a positive present tense statement is, I am healthy. You're looking for relationships and you're not finding a relationship, then a statement, I am lovable. And if that becomes programmed, then love is now open to you. Most of us, and I've seen this in our belief courses, 80 to 90% of every audience does not love themselves. No self-love. I go, how can that be? And the answer was simple, because what are the programs in that child's mind for the first 7 years? I go, well, as psychologists said, 70% or so are negative, redundant, disempowering, self-sabotaging. I go, well, how did they get there? And I say, here's the primary reason. Parents act like coaches. I said, what's a coach? Well, here's a team player. It's not performing well. It's not putting out the effort. And so the coach goes, come on, you don't deserve to be on this team. Who do you think you are? You're not that good. Why is the coach saying that? Just to piss off the player? No. The player is now thinking, oh my God, I got to perform better. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to do better because I want to show the coach that I am deserving of this. So the consciousness of the player is understanding what the coach meant because the coach said you're not good enough. And the consciousness is an interpretation. I'm not good enough because I'm not performing well, therefore I will perform well. I go, yeah, but that's when the student or whoever it is conscious. I say, what about a child before 7? I say, oh, they're not conscious. They're recording. I say, oh, if a parent's acting like a coach, what did the child just record? Not good enough, not deserving. Who do you think you are? You're not that good at this. You're not lovable. These are things that parents say. Why did they say them? Because they wanted to be the coach and say, come on, you could do better, needle them to do better. And I go, it only works if the child is conscious enough to understand the meaning. If the child is under 7, they're just recording the words. I say, what are the words recorded in this child's mind? Not good enough, not deserving, not lovable, not worthy. I go, oh, these are the programs of the subconscious mind. I go, yeah. And I say, what happens if that mind plays 95% of the time? Oh, what's the function of the mind? Take the program and create behavior that will, make coherence between the resulting life and the program. the program is not good enough, not worthy, not deserving, then guess what? The behavior is going to come from the mind. Any behavior that will show outside people that A, I'm not good enough, not worthy, or deserving, because my behavior will be coherent with the program. And this is why between 80 to 90% of the people in our workshops will not test positive to I love myself, because the fundamental programs are critical, self-critical. And I go, why is that relevant? Oh, here it is, Luis. You're going to get this one. It's simple. It goes like this. Program, I am not lovable. Issue, a partner shows up who says they love you. They say they love you. What is your mind thinking at that moment? What is your subconscious mind?
It can't possibly be true.
It can't be true. I know I'm not lovable, so how the hell can they say that? What will you do? You will push away love because you can't accept it for yourself. So when somebody else says it, it can't be true. And therefore, you will always be seeking love and never find it. Conscious mind, wishes and desires. Yes, I want that love. Yeah, 5% of the day. 95% of the time, you're not worthy. You don't deserve this. Who do you think you are? And all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, of course. If that's running 95% of the day, I'll never be successful. And why am I worried about it? And the answer is because that 95% of the day is not visible to me. So if I'm sabotaging myself 95% of the day with programs that will push away everyone who loves me, and at the end of the day come home and say, I can't find a mate. No one loves me. It's like, no, it didn't start there. It started with you. You didn't love you. No one else can love you. Mm-hmm. And when we put all this together, then when we recognize, well, the absolute truth is, we go back to the matrix. Yes, we've been programmed. The vast majority of the programs are negative and disempowering. So yes, the vast majority of people on this planet are having that negative experience as well, okay? So the next most important thing now is to recognize, well, if I'm not getting what I want, is it because the universe is not giving it to me? And the answer is almost inevitably no. It's because your own program that's invisible, operating 95% of the day, is keeping it away from you.
Wow. That is spectacular in every way, shape, and form, Bruce. It's amazing the way that you just laid it all out there for us.
Well, it's amazing for me because my life for 40 plus years was operating from these very negative, disempowering subconscious programs. I was seeking all the time love and that thing that I wanted and pushing it away unconsciously, end up rewriting the program. And I'm going to be seriously honest. If there's a heaven, I've really come to my own personal conclusion. You don't die and go to heaven. You're born to be in heaven. This is heaven. Why? This is where you came to create. Yeah, but if you look at the creations of most people, it sure as heck doesn't look like heaven. It looks more like hell. And I go, yeah, but they're not creating from their own wishes and desires until they take that red pill. I go, what was a red pill? Falling in love, because that's the first time in your opportunity is put your hands on the wheel and drive this vehicle and see where it took you. It's like, oh my God, what a strange trip it's been. Thank you, Jerry Garcia. All right.
I also find that when we kind of are in a flow state, when we're doing something creative or when I'm working on a project that I just can get immersed in, that I find that experience of not thinking and just in a state of being.
Yes, that's the whole issue. Because when you stop the thinking about that and just start responding to the world, then you, as I said, that's when you make the decision. I can make any decision I want with this response. But when your mind is preoccupied, the decision is already made. Your behavior is already programmed. And you're not even going to see it happen as it's being undone. And this is why being mindful is the whole secret. And then rewriting the ones that have kept you away from your destination. And in that process, by rewriting it, you've changed the outcome. And I can say that for a guy who had all this personal trouble for 40 plus years, for the last 20 years, I have been living a honeymoon. Really, really, every day, the joy and excitement of waking up in this beautiful planet. That's why I think heaven is here. Because when I changed my creative character from the negative one it was programmed with to the current one, the doors have opened, the paths have always been open. I'm surrounded by most loving people and wonderful world and everything. I live in a completely different world, same planet, but through different consciousness.
I just want to hang out with you more. Bruce, it's been so incredible to have you here. Go ahead, Kamala.
I just wanted to say from the deepest part of my heart, thank you so much for coming on the show and for blessing all of our listeners with this incredible information and transformation. So for all of you out there, we've been listening, as you know, to the Thriving Launch podcast, and we want to make sure that you all have access to what Bruce has offered you. As always, you can go to thrivinglaunch.com. We're going to make sure we have Bruce's books and his free resources to help you get on track. So check us out over there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks so much for having Bruce Lipton here on the show.
I really want to thank you, Louise, and Kamala for providing this opportunity to talk to your audience. And I then also want to especially thank your audience because they represent the cultural creatives in this world. These are the people that are looking for answers outside of the conventional box. These are the people that are seeking the new evolution. Every one of you that's listening is a participant in a new evolution. And what we've been trying to talk about is how to reprogram ourselves to merge into a world where we're not just surviving, but a world that we're thriving into. So thank you for listening, because this information, if you use it, when you create heaven around you, it also makes heaven around me. So I encourage that and appreciate it. Thank you all.
You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.
And be sure to tune into our next episode, where we're going to talk about social media and how to use it to create your brand, make more sales, and use free social media to